Mr. Ambassador, thank you first of all for seeing me. Thank you on behalf of diplomatic connections. Someone wrote recently that the Arab Spring has become the winter of Arab discontent. In Morocco, however, the narrative has been so far strikingly different as a result of the movement towards constitutional reform initiated by King Mohammed VI. Can you start off by walking us through some of the main developments of this reform?
Sure. First of all, I want to tell you that this trend of reforms are not the first step. King Mohammed started the trend of reforms a long time ago, more than 10 years ago, and I must say that the democratization process started in 1998 when King Hassan II called the leader of the Socialist Party, who had been in the opposition for more than 30 years, to be Prime Minister. Then, as you know, King Hassan passed away, and King Mohammed VI gave a speech, and he said that he was going to continue the democratization process.
It was the June speech.
It was the July speech of 1999, when he became king.
Oh, okay. Yes. Oh, that one, yes.
And he said that he was going to address human rights issues and women's rights issues. And if you look at what happened in the last, since he became king, so 12 years ago, he really delivered. So first of all, we had in 2002 the first elections that everybody said were free, fair, and transparent since independence, and that was under the request of King Mohammed VI. They were totally free and fair and transparent. Then the king appointed a commission called the Equity and Reconciliation Commission. It's about he asked the commission to look at past violations on human rights during the last 50 years. And that commission was led by a gentleman, who had been political prisoner under King Hassan, and many others. And really everything was done. They had public hearings, they checked with people, they investigated, and they produced a report. And not only did they produce the report, but they, first of all the families that were somehow touched by these violations of their human rights were indemnified. They received the indemnifications, and I think that the government paid something like $100 million for people who had suffered abuses on their human rights. And so that's one thing. The second thing, they produced a report that they gave to the king, and the king asked them to publish the report. And in that report, there were recommendations about how to make sure that the culture of human rights would be, embedded in the traditions of Morocco. The third thing, women's rights. We changed the family law, and today men and women are totally equal according to the family law. Mm-hmm. What is interesting about that family law, it is that it's a religious law, in the sense that the king appointed a commission. This commission in this commission you had political parties, women organizations, religious scholars, lawyers, and they came up with three proposals: the conservative one, the middle one, and the progressive one. And the king chose his commander of the faithful, and he chose for the most progressive one. And what is important is that the commission told the king that new law was totally in sync with the Islam. So we showed in Morocco that there is no contradiction between Islam and equality between men and women, and that's very important. Mm-hmm. In front of each change the law, there was a verse of the Quran change or a teaching of the Prophet. So that was it. And then we have had other elections in 2007, which were free and fair and transparent, according to international observers, and then 2009. Now, So we've had a lot of things
Right.
going on. And it was
So it's an ongoing process.
it was an ongoing process, and that was very important. What the Tunisians went to the streets asking, were asking for,
Right.
and what the Egyptians were asking for, we had it in Morocco. So basically freedom of speech, multi-party system, because in Morocco we've always had a multi-party system, and free and fair elections. So we already had that. But they, when we had some protests, so everybody thought that in Morocco would be immune of the Arab Spring. And, but nonetheless, some people called for protests on February 20, and globally we had 35,000 people in the streets. 35,000 all over Morocco, so 4,000 here, 5,000 there, so it was not much. And that was February 20. Immediately after, March 9, the king made a speech and announced changes in the constitution. That was March 9, and he appointed a commission to draft a new constitution, asking this commission to work with the political parties, the NGOs, and all the stakeholders in Morocco. And this is what happened. During the 4 months of between March 9 and June 17, the commission worked with political parties, with the NGOs, with the civil society. They received something like 200 memorandums from, of course, the political parties, the NGOs, but associations like the Soccer Association of Casablanca, or people like that. And the commission went on a perfectly inclusive process where they really worked with everybody, and they drafted a new constitution. The king announced his new constitution on June 17, and it's basically, in this new constitution, a lot of power shifted from the king to the prime minister and the government.
Right.
And that's very, so it's a real, very state-of-the-art constitution, and it's quite interesting to see how it unfolded in Morocco, because again, it was very inclusive. Everybody said, gave its input. There was a ongoing discussion between the commission and the stakeholders. You had a huge debate where everything was on the table, on TVs, and radios.
Right.
Everybody was there. And we had, the constitution was adopted by a referendum on July 1st. Those who launched, this wave of protests, February 20 movement, and the extreme left, and the Justice and Charity, which is an Islamist movement who wants to install the caliphate in Morocco,
Right.
with their leader being the Khalifa,
Right.
rejected the process. And so they rejected the process, and they called for a boycott of the referendum. Nonetheless, we've had a 72% turnout, and because they called for protest, for a boycott and not for a no, the number of yes was 98%.
98.8%, I'm told.
98.2% or something. And I can tell you that here in the United States, the yes was 95%.
Really?
Because the Moroccans here voted in.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah. If you had to focus on a single aspect of the constitution that you consider to be the most important of the reforms, what would it be? Or if there is one, indeed.
First of all, I think there are several important topics in the new constitution. First of all, the Moroccan identity. The constitution speaks about the Moroccan identity and how this Moroccan identity was built. So the constitution says that the Moroccan identity is the fruit of merge of Islam, Arabic, Amazigh, which is Berber,
Yes.
Jewish, Mediterranean, African, and Andalusian influence. So that shows the diversity of the country, but also the unicity of the country. I think that's important. The second thing is that there is a whole part on human rights and freedom of speech in the Constitution, really insisting on the culture of human rights and freedom of The rest, I think the most important thing is as I said, lots of powers are given to the Prime Minister, which will have the title of Chief of the Government.
Right.
And the Chief of the Government will be appointed by the King, like everywhere else in the world. It's the head of state that appoints the Prime Minister or the Chief of
But
Government.
from the victorious party.
Exactly. But exactly. The Prime Minister, the Chief of the Government will have to come from the party that won more seats in the elections. It doesn't say that the party that has a majority, but the relative majority.
I see, right.
So that's important. The powers of the government and the Chief of Government are quite important today, much more important than they were before. He will share the government. He will decide on how to govern the country. The appointments of the main, high-ranking officers of the administration, they will be appointed by the
judiciary.
The judiciary will be independent, totally independent,
Right.
and this is set in the Constitution. So basically, what you have here, if you look at the Constitution, I'm not a constitutionalist, but basically what you have is the legitimacy of the monarchy on one side, and the legitimacy of the vote,
Right.
working together.
Right.
So I think it's very interesting. As I said, the process took something like 4 months. I mean, it took 4 months to draft the Constitution, and I must say that it's quite a balanced Constitution and a very interesting Constitution.
But this is the transference of authority from the monarchy to the elected government. However, it's been noted that it does leave the king with considerable authority, including the veto power. Mind you, veto power is something which the President of the United States also has, so I don't think that that's that much of a great thing. But how far away is what's happening now with what the Feb 20 group wants, for example?
The February 20 group is a group of young people, and it's very difficult to know exactly what they want. And first of all, they split, and they don't agree between themselves, so you have some...
Right.
And there are a bunch of young people, which is good. The good thing about the February 20 movement is that you have young people involved in politics. Right. So what they want, when they, they went on TV shows, and so people were asking them what exactly they wanted, and it was very difficult to know exactly what they wanted. Right. I think that globally, what's happening, what they really mean, is that they would like to see better governance.
Yes.
This has nothing to do with the Constitution. They would like to see the corruption fought.
Yes.
Which is important, and I think that everybody agrees. And I think that, kind of, equality of chances for everyone. So this is basically what they're asking for, because the Constitution thing, if you look at the Moroccan Constitution and you compare it to the French Constitution, or even the Spanish Constitution, you will see that it's not that far away, or even the Danish Constitution. I did that exercise, and I looked at the constitutions, exactly the French and the Spanish, or the Danish Constitution. Mind you, the Danish Constitution, the king has a lot of powers if you look at the Constitution itself. So it's basically how you implement the Constitution. And if you look at even the British, I wouldn't say Constitution, but way of
the British thing is so amorphous and so dependent on tradition that there is no constitution.
There is no constitution. It's about how things happen.
Right.
And that was basically what in Morocco we had a constitution. I mean, the first constitution was in 1962, and we changed it 4 times, I think. But in Morocco, it's also how things are done and how the tradition, how things happen. This is just this new constitution tries to go beyond the tradition and beyond the balance of the powers and how people interact in Moroccan politics. And I think that's a very interesting exercise.
What about the Islamist challenge?
Look, Morocco made the choice, as I said, we have a multi-party system. And among the parties, political parties, we have the BJD, which claims to be
Right.
Islamic. They say that they are not exactly Islamic, but they say that Morocco, being a Muslim country by 99% or more, well, it should be governed with that sensitivity.
Right.
So they represent that part of the political spectrum, but they play by the rules. So they run for elections, and because in Morocco, what we did in Morocco was was a totally different choice from the other Arab countries. Because what we said, we thought that they expressed sensitivity. They expressed one part of the public opinion in Morocco, so it was fair to have that part of the public opinion represented in Parliament. So those play by the rules and play because they believe in democracy and they play by the rules. And let's see what happens. Now you have the other movement, which is the Justice and Charity movement.
Yes.
The Justice and Charity movement was organized by Sheikh Yassin. He's a gentleman who started to be in the opposition very early on. I'm talking about the late 70s. And they created this movement, and this movement doesn't want to play at all with the rules of the game. They reject any kind of Western type democracy, and what they believe in is the caliphate as the caliphate was supposed to be many centuries ago, which has never been that way. So, and they reject, not only do they reject any kind of Western democracy, but they want the end of the regime, basically. And they call, because they want to restore the caliphate and the king and their leader being the caliph.
Yes.
So they don't represent, you could see, I don't know how many people they have, but you could see probably around how many people they gathered when they called for demonstrations. That gives you the strength, their strength in the country. So those are the Justice and Charity. They are not violent. They're there. They are tolerated, if I say so. But they are not violent. Then you have of course, the violent side, the violent people.
Well, I was going to say the idea of the caliphate is also embraced by Al Qaeda.
It's a different way. I don't believe that until now they haven't been violent. They have not been. They have embraced any kind of violence. But we have some people who embrace violence, and we have had some terrorist attacks. Very few, thank God. But the last one was in Marrakech
Yes.
in April, April, and the other ones happened in 2003, and that was about.
And you have an Al Qaeda presence.
We don't really have an Al Qaeda presence. We have some people. First of all, what is Al Qaeda?
Oh, sure. I mean,
Al Qaeda, I think, became a franchise.
Yes, it's a franchise. You're absolutely right.
So it's people thinking that violence is a good way to go. I must tell you that, of course, 99.99% of the people reject totally that kind of attitude. And as I said, now we will have elections in November 25, and who wants to run for elections will run for elections, and we will see the results. That's very important. It's really a new life in Morocco, because today you will have the government and the prime minister have a lot of powers.
Mm-hmm.
The parliament has much more power than it used to have, although they had a lot of powers. But the way the previous constitution was implemented was is not exactly there. Now, by the constitution, they really have to take responsibility for their hands. That's very important.
So this new constitution, the November election will be the first under this new constitution.
Yes.
Well, so how was the constitution ratified? Simply by referendum, or will the new parliament ratify the constitution?
No, it's the referendum, because the referendum is the will of the people.
The referendum has, in effect, ratified the constitution
The referendum
by accepting it.
By accepting, so the people accepted the constitution, so the constitution,
Right.
and the new parliament and the new government will be ruled by the new constitution.
I see. So the new parliament cannot, in itself, fiddle with the constitution. If you
No,
like.
no, because it's
This is
the
a
will of the
federal
people. It's the will of the
Right.
people.
In your view, does this actually secure the future of the monarchy in Morocco?
Look, I think that, again, the monarchy is really very popular in Morocco. It is, this dynasty goes back to the 4 centuries. You have to be Moroccan and to have lived in Morocco to see and to feel the bond that there is between every Moroccan and the monarchy. It's really something very special. I must tell you that many people voted. I mean, I heard people who who wanted to vote no because this new constitution was taking away too many powers from the king.
Okay.
And many people, a lot of people voted yes because the king said that he was going to vote yes. But the monarchy is very, very, very popular, and King Mohammed VI is really, really very popular. If you travel around Morocco and you ask people, it's kind of a sacred figure. So I think that it's not about the monarchy, because the monarchy is really solid, more than solid in Morocco. It's the legitimacy of the monarchy is very strong. It's more about modernizing the political life in the country. So you see, it's not. That was the vision of the king for a long time. But you can't go quicker than the music, so things have to happen when they need to happen. I believe that all this is part of the vision of the king of how the country should be governed. This is how all this happened. It was not to preserve the monarchy or in a way of self-defense or anything. As I said, all this started a long time ago.
It wasn't a preemptive strike.
It was not a preemptive strike. I think it was just a continuity of a vision of how the country was going to be governed.
So the next part of this process will be elections.
The next part of the process will be elections, and then we will see how all this will play. And I think it's important to see how it's going to play.
What's the worst case scenario here?
I don't see. Look, the most important thing is that the economy, because what people want at the end of the day is to have, like everybody else, have jobs and have a good life. In Morocco, the economy has been doing well for the last few years. We've had an economical growth of 5%. So the big challenge is always how much this growth of the economy will trickle down to everyone. And the way of governing the country, the king launched a few years ago, I think 5 years ago, something called the National Initiative for Human Development, which is basically trying to reach out and make sure that the poorest parts of the country would get part of this economical development. And
we talk about the agrarian.
Agrarian, but also the poor sides of the cities.
Oh, right.
So we have a program of cities without slums. that you have some poor areas in the country. And I must say that it kind of worked because the level of poverty, the number of people living under the line of poverty dropped down from 15% to 9%, which was quite an achievement.
What is the level of poverty in Morocco? Is it anything like what it is in Egypt?
I don't know exactly because it's the purchase hour.
Yes, right.
I don't know exactly what it is, but we have an institution called the High Commissioner for Planning, and they have all the statistics. So they work according to the UN indicators, and according to the UN indicators, it seems that Morocco will be probably one of the very, very few countries to achieve the Millennium Goals by 2015.
Oh, really?
Yes. And among the good results is that you have the 15%.
Sure. Right.
But not everything is rosy, and we have a lot of issues. We have an issue of education, although the government spends around 30% of its budget in education. We have a big debate about how efficient this spending is. In Morocco, we have employment. We have unemployed young people.
Is it as bad as it is, or not was, but is in Egypt and in Tunisia? In Egypt, it's something like.
Oh, in Egypt it's terrible. But in Morocco, we have the unemployment hits the youth pretty badly, but at the same time, unemployment dropped to 9%.
I see.
So
Unemployment
it used to be globally, it used to be 13 to 14%, and now it dropped to 9%, and that's a real number. So things are improving, but nonetheless, you still have poverty. You still have the gap between the rich and big gap between the rich and the poor. I must say that that gap is the same as exactly the same number as the United States.
Oh, really?
Yes, but it's not good. We will have a deficit in the budget for this year, which will be higher than it has been last year and the year before, because the year before we balanced our budget. This because of the price of oil and the price of food.
And also the impact of the European economic problem.
The European economic problem.
Less tourists, maybe.
Actually, we didn't have less. We had the drop in the beginning of the year because of the Arab Spring, and because people they look from afar and they think that every country is the same. But I think that there was a growth lately in number of people coming in. That after the crisis, what is very interesting is that everybody was expecting a drop in the tourism in Morocco. Well, actually, it didn't happen. We had a growth, an increase of the number of tourists, probably because we are very close, and people, instead of going far away, they came to Morocco.
Right. Now, there's a gentleman by the name of Mekouar. Any relation? He lives in Wisconsin. He's in, I think it's Wisconsin, Milwaukee. He's a university there.
Yes, he's a professor. I met him once.
He says that, well, the constitutional reforms are very well, but the King Mohammed has yet to tackle one of the more serious problems, which is corruption. Particularly, he says, corruption among his inner circle. But now this notion of cronyism, of course, around the leader, whatever the leader is sort of endemic in the whole Arab Spring, really. What would you care to comment on that?
Yes, of course I'm going to comment on that. First of all, let me tell you something. I don't believe that there is any member of the government or any high official in somebody with a high civil service tell you. And by the way, there is a law today. When you become minister or you become high ranking in something, you have to declare your belongings, and you have to declare your belongings when you finish your job.
Right.
So we created, and the king created some years ago, a commission called an anti-corruption commission, where you have many people. They have the means, and not only the means, but today you can, if you had some people asking for corruption, you can go and put on the internet, on their website, the case of corruption. So there are many things done, and you have this institution that is working against corruption. This thing of cronyism, look, I don't believe.
I mean, he particularly makes the point of the Prime Minister, who says the Prime Minister is unpopular and I mean, this is what he's saying.
Yeah, yes.
The Prime Minister is not only unpopular, but has an enormous group of relatives and friends, all of whom benefits from his position.
Well, well, let me answer to that, because that's very important. First of all, the Prime Minister doesn't have any money, and all the people we're talking about don't have any money. So what happened? It's a kind of circumstances, and let me give you what are people talking about. The Prime Minister, his name is Aziz.
Yes.
The Foreign Minister is Taib Fessiferi,
Right.
his nephew, all right? But Taib Fessiferi had his own career before his uncle was Prime Minister, a long time before. Taib Fessiferi is not a member of the party of his uncle.
I see.
He's somebody that was been appointed by the king, and he's a career diplomat. Had nothing to do.
I met him actually.
Yes, you met him, and he has nothing to do. His career had nothing to do with his uncle's career. All right. You have the brother of Taib Fessiferi. He's the head of the electricity company. I mean, the big electricity company, the company that produces electricity. He did his career there. So he's there because he's good.
Right.
And you have the Minister of Health. She's the wife of the head of the ONE, the electricity company. But she's there because she's a politician, and she ran for election, and she won the election. So it's you have it happened that people did their careers completely independent one from the other, and it happened that they found themselves at the same moment.
Right.
But none of them was there because the Prime Minister appointed them there. Taib Fessiferi was not appointed by the Prime Minister. Adi Fessiferi, the guy from the ONE, was not appointed by the Prime Minister. He's a civil servant, very high ranking. And the Minister of Health, yes, she's coming from the same party, but she won the elections, and she won the elections in Casablanca. So you have this, and it's a family that has been in the civil service for centuries.
Yes. Right.
You can find the Minister of Fessiferi in 800, 900. So it's a long tradition of family. So this thing, that, people went after the Fessiferi family.
Right.
I think it's unfair. And because that means that because your name is Fessiferi, you shouldn't be working.
I see.
Just because your name is Fessiferi. So I really totally contest what he says, because all these people, one by one, did their careers totally on their own. It's unfortunate that they found themselves at the same moment
Right.
but it has nothing to do with cronyism.
Well, that's very interesting, yes. One thing I want to ask you is that in this whole movement which seems to be happening in the Middle East, when you talk about autocratic leaders, the tendency is to want regime change. However, with monarchies, notably Morocco, but also to some extent Jordan, who, by the way, the king has just announced a plan that sounds very much like the one that came out of Morocco, and even Bahrain, it's not regime change as such. It's a change in, as you say, in the way people are governed. Why is that? Why is there this difference between, you know, wanting to remove Gaddafi, Mubarak, etc., and not really being that vehement about the removal of a monarch?
You have, it's about the legitimacy. Monarchies have this legitimacy, and people, and there's this connection between the people and the monarchies. What is the legitimacy of the other regimes? They came, all of them, through a coup d'etat. All of them.
Right, absolutely.
None of them came from elections or any legitimacy. And that's a problem. That's a real problem. It's that they were military regimes, so you can have the legitimacy during a certain time, but then people don't recognize anymore your legitimacy. In monarchies, you have this bond, and you know very well England, and you know how it works. In Morocco, the legitimacy of the monarchy in Morocco really goes back 4 centuries. And don't forget that the king is the commander of the faithful also, and he's descendant of the prophet. So there is a real connection there. So this legitimacy is very important. And again, you have people who, let me give you an example. 2007, we had elections, totally free and fair. We had international observers, and political parties said that they had been free and fair. The turnout was 37%. So, you know, one day I was asking someone why you didn't vote. They said, well, these people are, you know, these politicians are there for their own interests. Thank God we have the king. And the king is there, so what do we need these people? Just to tell you how people feel about the monarchy. And that's very important.
What do you think is going to happen, just moving across a few borders there, what do you think is going to happen in Egypt?
75 million people, it's a lot of people, and I think they're still trying to figure out how all this is going to unfold, and it's not easy. It's not easy, it's difficult for me to say anything because I don't know, and I don't believe that anybody knows, but I think that, again, Egypt is a country where you have real good intellectuals and very high level intellectuals, and I think that they will end up by doing well. But this has been a revolution, and and the revolution was in February, and we are in August, so 6 months, not a long time.
So, in fact, in Morocco it's been a process, and in Egypt it's been a revolution.
Yes.
And the interesting thing is that Morocco is the only one that is from the top down.
Exactly, but the good thing about Morocco, and I think that's again a good recipe. Again, I don't know how it's going to unfold because this is a new politics in Morocco. But you have a top down, so you have the will of the top, which is very important. But you have the society which is ready, and this is where it can work. You cannot go quicker. The top cannot go quicker than the music.
I see.
And I think that little by little, what's happening in Morocco, it's not an easy process. It takes time. And politics are politics. But I think that it worked until now because there was kind of a match between the situation of the society and the will of the society and what the top wanted. I don't think, for instance, let me give you the example of the family law. Today, as I said, men and women are totally equal according to the family law. In terms of relationship, husband and wife, and the custody of children and that kind of stuff.
Inheritance is presumed.
Inheritance is a different thing, but we have to talk about that in a different way.
Okay.
It's more technical, but you can turn that around. But what I was saying is that women organizations have been fighting for this many years. Because you had the situation where you had women ministers, women ambassadors, women entrepreneurs leading thousands of people and not being adult within according to the family law.
Right.
So women had been fighting to change the family law for years. I think that it didn't happen because the society was not ready for it. When it was changed, not only there was will of the political leadership, and mainly the king himself, but also the society was ready. So it happened. In 1958, one of the leaders of the nationalist movement, Aziz, who was a religious scholar, drafted a family law that was very, very progressive. And then they had to back off because the society was a very traditional society.
In 58?
In 58. In 58, the first draft of the family law was absolutely fantastic. It was, men and women totally equal. But the society was not ready for it, so they had to back off. And it took 50 years to get where we are. So what I mean by that is that you cannot go too quick, you cannot go too slow, you have to make sure that you're more or less at the same level as where the society wants to be. Otherwise you have a clash.
Sure. When you look at the Maghreb in general, what worries you most?
The relations between Algeria and Morocco should be much better. We should have a regional integration. We should have the borders between Morocco and Algeria are closed. That we think, and there are I think 2 borders in the world which are closed: Algeria and Morocco, and the 2 Koreas. I think.
Right.
So it shouldn't happen because the people are very close one to the other. I mean, we speak the same language, we have the same religion. I think that we could do much better in the region, and it would be much better for everybody else, not only in the Maghreb but also in the Sahel region, if we had an integrated economy, if we had an integrated security and integrated policy. And I think, so what worries me is that lack of integration takes away a lot of opportunities. And also, in matters of security, we could do much better, because then you have Al-Qaeda, in southern Algeria, Mali, and the Sahel region. You have drug trafficking, which is coming from Latin America, wandering in that Sahel region, because you have, states without many means.
Right.
You have illegal migration and human trafficking. If we were working together, we could address those issues really much better. Unfortunately, it's still not happening. There are some steps that have been taken between Algeria and Morocco. We just signed a few things, but we should really, really do better.
Right. It's not. There's never been a kind of any kind of attempt to create a union of some kind.
Yes.
Between the 4 or 5 nations of the Maghreb.
We did. In the end of the 80s, the Maghreb Arab Union was created by the leaders of the 5 countries: Mauritania, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya. And unfortunately, it's stalled. It's stalled because of mainly because of the relations between Algeria and Morocco, which are not good, which are not where they should be.
Yes.
And again, if you look at Moroccans and the Algerians, we are really close, and we can do much better together, and for the benefit of everybody, for the Moroccans and the Algerians, but also for everybody else.
One final question, and what about the relations with the United States?
With the United States, relations between Morocco and the United States are excellent. I was lucky enough to see many things happening between the 2 countries. First of all, it goes back a long time, and
Sure.
And Morocco, as you know, was the first country to recognize the United States in 1777.
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that? Okay, so Morocco was the first country to recognize this. Yes, 1777, and there's a very interesting letter sent by George Washington to the King of Morocco, Sultan of Morocco, the third, thanking him for everything that Morocco had done for the United States. So even before France. And the oldest treaty is with the United States. It goes 1786, and it's a treaty of friendship that still is in force. So that goes a long time. It goes back a long time in history. After and during the 19th century, many things happened between the United States and Morocco. Then we had the Protectorate, the French and Spanish Protectorate between 1912 and 1956. But after 1956, relations started to be pretty good, and we were pretty much on the same side as the United States during the Cold War. While most of the countries in the region were in the other side. Were in the other side. Recently, what happened recently is that under my watch, we signed a free trade agreement. We were the second Arab country to sign a free trade agreement. That was in 2004, and it entered into force in 2006. Morocco was declared a major non-NATO ally, and there are, I think, 14 countries in Morocco. We signed a compact, an MCA compact, by which it's $697 million given to Morocco over a period of 5 years. They were development of agriculture, fisheries, and handicrafts. It's a very special compact, and you're eligible to that kind of compact when when you have a democracy.
Yes, human rights are okay.
Human rights. So, and of course, even on the main issue, the Western Sahara issue, the United States have been pretty helpful. They have been helpful in trying to help solve the problem. So, so I must say that the relations are excellent, very, very good, and we can do more. Trade between the two countries went up by 185% since 2006 because of the free trade agreement, but we can do much better.
Well, on behalf of Diplomatic Connections, thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. This has been
Thank you very much.